I grew up with a Commodore 64 back in the 80s, and I probably held on to it far longer than most kids did. Meanwhile, the world was slowly transitioning to IBM PCs and clones. But eventually my C64 decided to die one day, and I got one of these. For this year's DOScember, I want to get back to my own early DOS days. This is an IBM PS2 from the release year. It's a 1987 Model 50-286. The Personal System 2 officially replaced the IBM PC, XT and AT. It was a rather significant system that introduced the PS2 mouse and keyboard connector, the VGA standard 72-pin SIMs, and diskette drives for 3.5-inch double-sided high-density disks. At the time of getting one of these IBMs, I had already been using PCs for several years at school, but I didn't realize that I was also getting into the world of microchannel architecture. And MCA is of course the main challenge in this project. Unfortunately, I sold my Model 50 decades ago when I moved abroad, because of a lack of storage. But a few years ago, I decided to pick one up again. And this PS2 turned out to be a rather lengthy adventure. So far in this project, we have done a teardown and realized that it must have been used in a factory or a warehouse. The entire system was completely filled with nasty black dust and soot. To this day, it's still by far the filthiest PC I have ever worked on. It was absolutely disgusting, but eventually we got it cleaned up and partially running. I then had to hack this machine to take a standard diskette drive, because the original drive had a broken ribbon cable inside and was beyond repair. And finally we got it booting to DOS. Next I managed to find a matching diskette drive, but that drive couldn't read any diskettes that weren't made on that particular drive. So we had to do a head alignment. Then we borrowed the case lid from a spare Model 70, because the original case needed a respray. I still haven't figured out how to find the correct PS2 color, so that lid is still on this Model 50. By the way, if you know what the color code is for the PS2 line, and also the earlier IBM PCs, feel free to share. Finally, we took on the issue with the hard drive, but unfortunately it was beyond repair. So I got an MCA SCSI card for the project, and we tried out a few SCSI drives. For reasons still unknown to me, it turned out to only work with one of my drives, and that drive is too large to fit inside the case. Since then, I have been collecting period correct SCSI drives, and I think I finally have a drive that will work with our MCA card and will fit inside the case. I have also restored an 8518 display in a separate video, larger than the 8513 that we have been using so far. So let's continue the adventure of my very first Microsoft Intel-based PC. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor PCBWay. Aside from making excellent PCBs, they also do CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing and injection molding. Check out their shared projects page, where you will find some really cool projects for your vintage PC. Get an instant quote now at PCBWay.com. Okay, let's see what's going on here. So, when we left off this project, everything was working fine. And now we've got 601, and 161 is bad CMOS. Then we've got an error for time and date. So it looks like our CMOS battery has gone bad. But that battery was new when we started off this project. And that was just a few years ago, so I was expecting that battery to last much longer. Let's try to run the reference diskette. And I think it's F1. No, let's reboot. And it's reading from the diskette. But we still got the same errors. Let's try a cold boot. And no difference whatsoever. So I can hear the machine trying to boot from the diskette, but then it just stops. Let's take a look inside. Well, the CMOS battery inside this machine is absolutely huge. So one would think that it would last forever. Yeah, here it is. And it's one of those large camera batteries. I guess we should check the voltage. And we've got 6 volts. So the CMOS battery seems good. Well, let's try with some deoxit on the connector for the diskette drive. Yeah, we might as well try the simple stuff first. So we did a head alignment on this drive in one of the previous videos. And someone else had already recapped this drive when I got it. So it should be okay. Let's try to boot again. That's very strange. So it does make a couple of clicking noises, but then nothing. And I'm also trying to push F1. But all we get is IBM Basic. So something is wrong with that diskette drive. Let's replace it and see if we get a different result. And since this board is hacked to take a standard diskette drive, we can just plug in this random drive here. Let's try with the reference diskette again and see what happens. And we're getting the same fault. And I just realized what's wrong with this machine. We snatched the disk controller from this board when we were repairing the 7496. So the controller on this board is the original chip from the 7496. And that chip turned out to be glitchy. So I guess we need to replace that chip. And by the way, I have one of those chips on the way in the mail. So I will have a working chip for the 7496. Probably in a few days. And the cool thing about this case is that it's sort of toolless. It does require a tool, but it's included in every system. And it's made for these plastic clips. So it's a rather nifty system. And aside from the motherboard and the power supply, everything is held in place with these tabs. And by the way, we did replace the fan in one of the previous videos, because that original fan was very noisy. And the hard drive is mounted on one of these brackets, and then it's just snapped in place. Well, unless it's huge like this drive here. And now I think we can remove the battery. And don't forget to make a backup of the BIOS settings before you remove the battery. Now on this machine the BIOS has already been cleared, so it doesn't matter. But if you have a bunch of cards installed, you should definitely make a backup. And now we should be able to remove this entire midsection of the chassis. There's a really funny episode on Computer Chronicles from the introduction year of these machines, where they try to take one apart. Man, that chip was stuck. So this is the original chip from the 7496. And we tried it out on this board. And at first we thought it was working, but apparently it's glitchy. And the only chip I have is the one that we have in the 7496. So that one is gonna have to come out. Okay, time for a test. And I can hear the system read from the diskette drive. We only have 2 fault codes now. Let's try with F1. And it works, so excellent. I guess we should set the time and date. So the Model 50 doesn't have an accessible BIOS through a menu. Instead you have to use one of these reference diskettes. So that's what we are doing now. So let's hit F8. Okay, automatic configuration complete. Now it's recognizing the future domain card. That is our MCA SCSI card. And it recognizes our quantum hard drive. Now everything seems to be running fine. And it boots to DOS. So I guess the next thing is to try that original diskette drive. Okay, let's try with the original diskette drive. And DOS 622. Okay, let's see if it boots. The system is now up and running. Okay, let's try that SCSI drive that I have found and see if it works with this system. And this is one of the drives that I have collected for this project, and I think this is the only one that worked. And it's a 1 gig Seagate ST11200N, and it has an Apple part number, just like this huge drive. It has an Apple logo with the numbers 40. So apparently this Model 50 likes Apple drives. And by the way, if you recognize this drive and know which Apple it matches, I'd be very interested to know. I probably have a matching machine in storage. Okay, let's see if this drive works. No SCSI drives found. So we probably need to get into the settings and make some changes. So let's run the reference diskette again. And by the way, it remembers the time and date, so there's nothing wrong with that battery. Okay, let's see if I remember how to do this. So you can't just slap in any old SCSI drive into a PS2. You have to use a reference diskette. But I haven't done it in a while, so let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, so we've got an option here, set and view SCSI device configuration. That is probably what we want to do. There are no SCSI adapters installed. Something is wrong. Let's try to run automatic configuration. And automatic configuration complete. So let's go back to set and view SCSI device. There are no SCSI adapters installed. I guess I should check all the cables. And I found a fault, so apparently that drive wasn't the one that actually worked with this system. But this drive does. And this is a Seagate ST32430N. And unfortunately it's not as quiet as that huge quantum drive. So I think I'm gonna keep searching for a suitable drive for this system. I'm an old school guy, so I like mechanical hard drives. But there's no need to cope with extremely noisy hard drives. But let's continue for now, and I will replace it in another video. So let's install DOS and Windows. So this system was released with DOS 3.30, but by the time I had left this machine, I had upgraded to DOS 6.2.2. So that's what we're gonna go for now. But before we do, I want to mount the hard drive inside the machine and put the lid on to reduce the noise. And I don't want to drill holes in the original bracket in case I ever find one of the original drives in working condition. And the holes don't line up with the hard drive. So I think that with some double-sided tape and a screw with just one of the holes, that should be sufficient. And hopefully we could just slide it in place now. Yeah, that hard drive isn't going anywhere. And to keep the noise down, I'm gonna make sure to replace the covers for the MCA slots at the back of the machine. And one of them was missing, so I borrowed one from my PS2 tower because I have a spare case. And this machine was missing one cover because I think it came with a network card. So now we can put the cover back on and make a nice and quiet installation. Well, that SCSI drive isn't too bad, but I have definitely had better, so I'll keep looking for a better drive. And we are finally ready for DOS installation. And we're gonna jump out of the installation and make a new partition in F-disk. So let's see what we've got here. And we seem to have a 500 meg partition on a 2 gig drive. So that is more than sufficient for this system. And I think that's a good choice. And I'm going to delete that partition and create a new one. Yes, I'm sure 500 meg is more than sufficient. Let's make the partition active. And we should be done in here. And I have already unboxed one of these DOS 622 packs on this channel. So I'm going to leave the shrink wrap on this box and use a set that we have already unboxed. So now we can proceed with the installation. This is weird. It claims that we already have an MS-DOS installation, but we removed that partition, so this is weird. So I'm gonna exit out and take a look in Fdisk again. Let's see what we've got with option 4. This is weird. So the only partition in here is the one we just made. So apparently our DOS installation is a bit confused. Well, I guess we can format that drive before we enter the installation. Yeah, sure. Okay, so I guess I'll have to boot and try again. Yeah, many fond memories from the IBM PS2 Model 50. So at first I was just playing around with BASIC, but then I quickly moved on to DOS. And eventually I installed Windows. So eventually this machine will be upgraded to run Windows, on top of DOS of course. And by the way, I was supposed to finish the Canon 286 video, or the Commodore 486 project this week. But the crystals that I had ordered for the 486 were delayed in shipping. For some bloody reason they were sent back to the seller. And he sent them to me again of course. But that caused a delay in the project. And for the Canon 286, I decided to order a new ESR meter before we continue that project. So those projects are just slightly delayed. And I really like how solid this IBM is. Compared to my clones, this machine is so solid and clunky. It just oozes industrial high quality. I can sort of see why they were so expensive compared to the clones. And the installation program is advertising some of the new features of DOS 622. And speaking of DOS, I just received 2 of my unicorns in the mail this week. So early next year, I will make a couple of videos about a few things from the very top of my bucket list. And it's a 286 system too, but I'm not gonna tell you more. The rest is gonna have to be a surprise. This is taking forever. I'm obviously skipping quite a bit here, but luckily we're just installing DOS today. I remember back in the day when I was installing DOS and then Windows, and on top of that I would typically install Word and Works. That took like forever. We are ready for the final disk, and just listen and look how smooth this is. These IBMs are just in their own league. There's just no comparison to other systems. Someone really put some effort into making that diskette drive. They don't look very special on paper, but when you use it, it's a really nice experience. And especially with that MCA bus, they probably put most people off. But if you ever get the chance to play around with one of these, I'm sure you're gonna love it. And it's a shame about that flicker, but I can't set my camera for this refresh rate. And by the way, I'm still looking for the 8514 for this project to match my 8514A graphics card. I haven't checked the spec sheets yet, so I don't really know if the 8518 or the 8515 will do that graphics card justice. And my 8515 still isn't restored, so I have not tried it yet. And I don't want to power it up before I have checked inside, in case there is a refa inside or some other issues. And we're finally done. Starting MS-DOS. Excellent. So, a bit of a milestone for this project. And it sure has taken its time. Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to play on this machine this weekend, because we still don't have a sound card. So we only have the PC speaker. But let's just try it out with something to make sure that it works. And unfortunately we're gonna have to go with PC speaker here. Well, this is all we have time for this week, but this project is far from over. We still have the biggest challenge left, and that is how to get good DOS game sound out of this IBM. And it's not as simple as just slapping in any old ad-lib, unfortunately, but there are a few options for these microchannel machines. So that is going to be a future video for sure. And we will also upgrade to the big fat dual PCB graphics card from IBM, the 8514A. and restore my 8515 display. And hopefully one day I will find an 8514 display. Thank you for watching. If you want to support this channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment and ring the bell below.